Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And welcome back, everybody. It's got a fascinating story, and it starts when he was much younger as a tennis pro, and that continued on to million-dollar contracts, many. And then he kind of left that behind and moved into the field of architecture. We've got him here today. He's got a brand new book out that centers on his tennis career, My Own Court, the life story of tennis legend John Riggio. And John's back with us. Hey, John, how you doing today?
Great, thanks. Hi, Steve. How are you?
I know the book just came out just a few weeks ago. Congratulations again on that. That's fantastic.
You're welcome.
Why don't we look deeper into the book? We just mentioned it last time we got together. Where do we start? Can we go through the book?
Yeah, I think first, yes, I made the book. It was just published February 26th, and I have two hard copies of them. One is the book here. This has the hardcover binding. So for a little more money, you can get it with a nice hardcover.
Mm-hmm.
And the picture is right on the hardcover of the book. And it's really good. It has approximately 232 pages, has everything in here. And then I have the soft cover. It's listing here on Amazon for $18.99 right now. And this is the soft cover. This is pretty good. This is easy like to put in your bag. It's a little lighter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really good reading.
Wow.
So the book, I really was just a result of really these videos and starting off all the way back with the audio broadcasts. And so from making them, I wrote the book. I included the podcast network in here. I have a couple pictures I'll go over today. I'll show you where they are in the book. And the book overall, what I did was I made it really very straightforward. It's a book really like maybe a 12-year-old could read this book and they could really start to dream, get some ideas of how to move forward. And that was the basic idea. I try not to go off course too much with different stories. I think I have all kinds of very interesting stories in the book. And you could probably go off and just, talk about them. I think some of my podcasts, the ones that we had already discussed, go in more detail. They give some names. I left a lot of names out of here. I just kept the book very straightforward, easy to read. And I took out any sexual content out of the book, any kind of violence, any kind of incident that took place. I tried to keep it under 5. So I tried to keep those things to a minimum. So it's good for any audience to read it. And probably like, maybe as early as 12 years old,
sure,
teens, adults would like to read this book. It's very interesting. I think one thing that's good about older people to read, there's a lot of names that were in the news. And that's really like from my generation. So if you're like in the 50s, you might want to read this book and these different names that they were on TV and things like that. So that is another thing about the book.
And gotta say, they're tennis legends. And I remember, a while back doing a podcast with you, and you dropped some of the names of some of those tennis stars. Many different ages would remember the names of them. They made a mark. It was a time back then, call it the 80s, where these sports figures were very noted. It made a mark on us. And I love the fact that the book is a journey of you from when you were younger. So yeah, certainly somebody in their teens can read it and pull from it that, dreams do come true. You were just messing around playing tennis, and then one step led to another, to contracts and cars and just notoriety and all of that. How does the book begin? Why don't we share that with everybody? Like the starting point.
Okay, so let me share the screen. I
Sure.
can go to the PDF copy. The PDF copy should come up for sale very soon. First, the soft cover and the hard cover are on there, and now the PDF copy of the book should come up. And then also with the PDF copy, there are some other things I'm going to have. Audiobook is going to come up too, so you could just listen to the book too. You don't have to read anything. That should come up shortly also. So this here, this is the PDF copy of the book. And so I think just starting off at the very beginning, I just say, let's pass the introduction and let's go here. Okay, so really what it does is starts off when I was very young. I explains the background of my family. And I think I described a little more of the background of my parents and my grandparents, even my great-grandparents, because of the situation that took place with the prince and the knighting and everything. So I gave them a little extra information on here so you could piece it together. And it doesn't really go off too much of my story. It just gives a few different things about my parents.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wait a
Some,
minute. Hold on a second there. Scroll back. Hold. This is so funny. We got one more. Yes. Port Jefferson.
yeah, that was really my mother and her parents. They used to have a summer home out in Port Jefferson.
That's where I'm from.
Yes, they used to go there in the summer a lot of
Wow.
times, and then in the colder months, they always used to go there on the weekend. So that's just one
Wow.
thing. That
It's
was very,
funny the way things connect, though. I mean, that's, and by the way, for everybody that might be listening and not looking, that we're talking about Port Jefferson, Long Island, New York. I just saw the name pass by as you were scrolling. I'm like, wait a minute. Looks familiar. Wow.
yes. Yeah, so they used to go there to their summer home, and I think that's typical of a lot of people at that time in history. A lot of summer homes were in Port Jefferson. They had different areas out there on Long Island. A lot of people used to go drive right there in the weekend and the summer, and they used to live in the city, so they like to go out there, the nice countryside for on the weekend,
Hmm.
and that's was one thing. And then from there, I just described the story of how when I was very young, we went out to the courts and I started to play tennis and started to break those wood rackets back then. So I got an idea that I could play tennis, and I described that in the story here. And I just go through some things like that. This is some basic history of just ordinary things. This is showing my great grandparents far away. This is some stories of that there. And this, I have some very nice, interesting stories as I'm growing up that I ended up breaking all the rackets that I had at home. And I started to glue them together to fix them. Some of them, the strings were broken. I'd broken the strings. So I learned how to take the strings, piece them together through the holes and make a little knot. And the rackets were still usable. After I glued them together and pulled the strings back together, they were still usable. And that is one piece of story. I put some names in here. And then one particular racket that I remember was they had these two rackets. One was for a guy, one was for a girl. So the guy was Marty Risen, and he had his photograph on the racket. So when I was young and my parents were saying that I could play pro tennis, they could tell that I used to look at these rackets and think, that I'm going to grow up, I'm going to try to see if I can get a racket with my name on it and things like that. And that was pretty good. This is also, I give some background of how my family used to work back there growing up, which is probably typical for most people. I think if someone could read this, they could always just compare it, things like that. And just my schedule, waking up early, getting involved with all these different things like the Boy Scouts and things like that. And most people like that. And just some things like when I was young, I was meeting people that were in the news a lot. I think even here I put in some incidents when I was meeting politicians and their children and things like that. And then I just go through some things of growing up and the public school, pointing out that I could play professional sports when I got older. They could tell by different tests they did, exercises, things like that, that they could tell that I could achieve with that. I just sort of see the situation here in my family also. Um, then I just go through some basic things of that as I was growing up, of course, my father had passed away, and then led to that Prince racket. And the Prince racket bent the Prince racket, and then the pro shop of Patrick Mulrooney picked up me as a prospective pro, and I was signed on, and that's
Mm.
what really started it. So this is how this started. And I go through some just interesting things in my younger history, which is always good to read about. It's fun stories. And then I go here is how I started to develop. I started to make the tennis club so I could really get into playing pro tennis. And this is when I was introduced to Anthony Cambrian. This is when it really started to happen when I signed on and with the U.S. Tennis Center and really started to get into playing pro mats is going through the different levels. And I described how I started to play and had to try to push to play better and better, starting off just at 50% and trying to move up to 75% and trying to get better and better to play. This is like just a picture of the courts where I lived. And this picture isn't an original photograph, it's just from recent times.
Hmm.
But these courts and the buildings look about the same. They aren't that different. And this is sort of where we used to play. And from here, just go on different stories, school stories, making friends with tennis, taking on the name Jack Racket at the time, and then meeting my new girlfriend Delilah, and then with the where she was the ice skater there. I have all kinds of stories and a lot of interesting, fun stories in here. I try to keep any bad stories to a minimum. I did keep a few bad stories so they get the idea some things were happening and they someone could always learn from those different stories and things like that. So I was just going through here and this here showing all kinds of different friends that were expanding. They liked my tennis. And I just explained some things about also playing with friends at home, neighborhood
Hmm.
sports, and how that was also very good to keep in shape and keep all kinds of different skills going. So that was good, and I have this in the book. And then I talk about some academic things. I used to like to read a lot. I used to do things like in the public library when I was young with the reading club was once number one in the reading club and things like that were important. And I think some of these things also I start to talk about how they school was also suggesting different careers. One was, of course, the architect career, and then I was exposed to a couple of things. One was computers, and the other one was aviation with piloting an airplane. So I those three are really all I keep it to, and I discuss those in the book sometimes. One of them was also when I was playing with the Top Pro Group, something opened up where I found out the other players were also piloting airplanes. So
Wow.
I have a whole story of how I was at the airport and I look over and I see the other pro players piloting an airplane also. So that was really very interesting. And So this here, then I talk about some things that was in excellent shape, and I put my actual measurements here of my health. I was 149 pounds. Uh, my blood pressure was 114 over 74, pulse 70, hearing 15, 15, vision 520,
Wow.
8% body fat, and very low cholesterol is 511. So that made me number one in that classification with my doctor, and I just put it on there. So
I have to tell you, John, it's really cool seeing you share those things. Um, Even, your medical stats from when you were, getting deep into this. Um, it gives us a better feel for you, in terms of what kind of shape you were in. And when we talk about the book being for anybody, it's an example that if you lead a clean life and you exercise all the time, and it seems like you no matter what you were doing, you were always moving, whether it's on the court, you're playing another sport, whatever it is, but that led to the success there and staying in shape, lesson to be learned right there.
yeah, I was able to utilize my thin body and running around and things like that, and really was able to use it to play tennis. So that was one thing that I did, and this whole thing with the physical exam was very good. But one thing I don't know if everyone knows about, but to play pro tennis, you have to have a physical exam. Not everyone passes the physical exam. It's really important. They want to know that the player is going to go there and his physical condition is where he's not going to collapse or anything. He's going to play safely. So they do have a physical exam. They have that also for the piloting. So this particular doctor, I knew to take the physical exam for piloting an airplane, and then also the physical exam for playing sports. So
Wow.
I was able to go to this doctor for both of them. And it turns out he was also involved not only as a aviation doctor, but he was also a doctor for pro sport players too. I was really lucky that he was able to work on both of them, and that really helped me. So I was able to get a lot of insight into that. And whenever I had some injuries in tennis, I used to go back to this doctor, and I always did pretty good. I was able to heal from them. They weren't serious, so I was lucky. But whenever I went back there, I always learned different things about what was happening with my different pulls of my muscles and pains and things like that. And I was able to really get through them. So that would work good.
Mm.
I just talk about interesting things like also the different stories and sports. And then from there I start to get into some different stories of what was happening on the court, playing different players and things like that. And talking about some things about when the prospects they sent over the scouts to look at me and see which one wanted to really pick me up for the sponsorship with the different racket companies. So I went through that. And so the book goes through everything. It isn't really like a total encyclopedia of everything. I think some things I said on the videos I didn't put in the book. I didn't have room for everything. So I went through and tried to keep it as a nice story that flows through and try not to go off the path too much. Just try to keep it so they get the idea of this is really like a story directly going through tennis. And then it culminates also in the story of when uh, I started to do the audio broadcasts and the video broadcasts for my architect profession just in recent years. This is like the
Hmm.
year 2019. And I show here, I think if I'm gonna let me go down to this here, I describe how I started my office also. Describe some networking stories I had talked about and meeting different political parties through the years, getting help from a variety of all different kinds of people, different political parties. And this here just shows some things here with my career. And then as I go through, I start to talk about the podcasts. So the podcast really started to take place in my office here in New Jersey. And
Wow.
and this is one thing that's from the podcast here is Billboard in Manhattan. So I have the snapshot here of my picture here in Times Square.
Amazing.
And
Amazing journey going from tennis to architecture and everything else.
yes, then here just shows some things of returning to playing tennis. And then we see some of the videos from the podcast. I have a couple pictures here. And this is just some pictures playing on the courts here. Oh,
Sure.
okay, here we are. So this is showing the one podcast here. I think before I show the podcast, I also described some basic things of what I've been doing, teaching tennis locally in recent years. And I just show some pictures here of the podcast we've been making. And this shows here, and here we are. This is the in-studio broadcast.
Ah, yes, I remember that we did that together. Yes.
So I think that this worked really good. And I described that whole thing about how the podcast really brought my memory back. And really, while I was writing this book, and I didn't have like a year to write the whole book. I was just doing it in a short time. And as I was writing the book, more memories were coming back. And I think the last few chapters, I had just really started to remember from my last few sponsors. And from that, I added that to the book. So that was really good. I think and then I have here just in
He looks familiar. Who is
Tokyo,
that?
Japan. Oh, yes, this is Shiji Nishio. This is my sponsor. He was a tennis administrator. And when he was younger, he was also a pro tennis player in Japan.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so so I went there, and this is the picture of when I was able to meet them. This was on a very hot summer afternoon, and so it was pretty good. So I just was able to take that nice picture there, and this going through the different pictures here. Then I just have a quick conclusion to the book, also just going through, and then at the end of the book, I have just the tournaments. So if people watch TV and they can't put together what's going on with the tournaments, I put this together. And this is because I was able to play to the top of the tournaments. I was able to play through them. And I describe really playing what's going on from level 5.5. And level 5.5 is usually called the national tournament level. And I describe that. And then from there, I just give a standard list of
Oh, wow. I love that.
my
Your tennis alias names. Yes. And I remember you had mentioned some of those in previous podcasts. John Strong, Beastman, of course, Jack Racket, who you mentioned before. We're out of time, but just to remind everybody, the reason that they gave you aliases, why was that done?
that is required like a stage name. It's supposed to keep me safe and so people can't know where I live or
Wow.
what I'm doing or maybe go after my finances. So I think originally it was meant for safety, very similar to an actor's stage name. It also was supposed to get rid of different things like prejudices of people's names. The
Sure.
idea was to just have a name like Jack Racket, and they wouldn't know what country I'm from,
Right.
things like that. That was what I was told when I first started, and my first official name was Jack Racket. That was formulated in the book. I go through some names that I had already proposed, and I think from the list I have there are even more of them. I had proposed so many names, so many different phone calls that my coach had to make. I remember one name was even approved for 1 week, and then they called me and they said, no, it's not approved anymore. They decided to call me back. And so it was unbelievable. The name Jack Racket was one that was first approved, and I was using it in public for a while. So I think the name Jack Racket, very possibly, if it went ahead, would require more paperwork like to legalize it, use it legally, like say an actor or actress, and that is what was happening.
Yeah.
Are we still on the share screen?
We had to take it down because we're out of time. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. So really, and also the word tennis legend is an official term. I was told I made the official term tennis legend by winning a certain number of tournaments, and I was then given that title by the ATP. If there was any other things like that, I might not have remembered all of the things that I have earned. I list as many things I can remember, but the word tennis legend is an official term that I had earned by winning a certain number of tournaments.
Amazing. John, thank you for sharing that. I'm glad we dug into the book. It's available on Amazon. What a great read. What a great inspiration. Doesn't matter if you're aspiring to play tennis or just play on the weekend. A lot of insight there, but just a journey of having a affinity for something and then what it can turn into. My Own Court, the life story of tennis legend John Riggio. Find it on Amazon. Of course, your website, easy to find in itself. It's simply your name, right? John, RIGGIO.com?
Yes, that's correct.
Beautiful. John, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks a lot, Steve. Talk to you later.
We'll be right back. Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply stop to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.